In the prestigious neighborhood of Woodcrest Pines, the Thompson family lives a life of comfort until a surprising discovery about Isaiah, a quiet delivery man, begins to challenge everything they thought they knew. When they learn that Isaiah isn't just a delivery driver but the landlord of much of their street, the Thompsons are faced with their own assumptions and a hidden legacy of kindness built into their community. As they get to know Isaiah and the diverse people of Woodcrest Pines, the Thompsons find themselves on an unexpected journey, learning that true strength lies in understanding and connection. But will they truly open their hearts? And how far will Isaiah's influence reach? If you're curious about how this family's journey unfolds, hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into the story of Woodcrest Pines and the unexpected power of one man's quiet impact. Jack Thompson looked out over his front yard with satisfaction, taking in the early morning light that spilled across the well-tended lawn, the neat hedges, and the house he and Linda had carefully curated for over a decade. Woodcrest Pines was the kind of neighborhood people aspired to live in, with its quiet streets, upscale homes, and a sense of order that matched Jack's own ideals of how life should be lived. Jack ran a successful law practice and took pride in being a respected figure in his community. His life followed a structure as neatly set as the pristine houses on his street, and he liked it that way. His wife, Linda, was equally committed to maintaining their household, spending her days managing every detail. Their 17-year-old daughter, Emma, often joked that her mother's love for order bordered on obsession, but Linda took that as a compliment. Jack returned from his morning jog to find Linda already preparing breakfast, bustling around the kitchen in a perfectly pressed blouse and tailored pants. Emma, in contrast, was a vision of teenage dishevelment, her dark hair falling across her face as she scrolled through her phone at the counter. "Good morning, sunshine," Jack said with a grin, leaning over to kiss her on the head. Emma murmured a greeting without looking up, and Linda shot her husband a quick, chastising glance as if to remind him that their daughter's appearance could use a little more polish. "You know, we have a delivery coming this morning," Linda said, her voice tinged with a note of preemptive disapproval. "Mom, it's just groceries," Emma replied, rolling her eyes. "Nobody cares what I look like." Linda clicked her tongue, ignoring her daughter's indifference as she went back to chopping vegetables. "I just want this house to look presentable. It's important for people to see that we take pride in our home." Jack shrugged. "It's a good thing, Emma. Your mom's right. We work hard to keep this place looking nice, and that includes how we present ourselves." Emma made a face but didn't argue. She knew that in her parents' world, appearances mattered, perhaps more than anything else. The doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of their delivery. Linda took a deep breath, checked her reflection in the mirror by the door, and opened it with a practiced smile. But her expression faltered slightly as she took in the sight of Isaiah Harper, the delivery man. Isaiah was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a crisp uniform and carrying the bags with the ease of someone accustomed to physical work. His face was calm and unreadable, but his eyes held a quiet intelligence that caught Linda off guard. For a brief moment, Linda hesitated. She had grown used to seeing the same familiar faces in Woodcrest Pines, and Isaiah's presence felt unfamiliar, even intrusive. "You can leave the bags here," she said, her tone a bit curter than she intended. Isaiah nodded politely. "Of course, Mrs. Thompson. I just have one more bag in the truck." Linda stepped back, watching as he walked down the hall toward the kitchen. Emma glanced up as he entered, offering a small, polite smile, though she seemed hesitant to say anything. Isaiah carefully set the bags down by the counter, his movements quiet and respectful. But just as he turned to leave, Linda's elbow brushed against a bowl on the countertop, sending it tumbling. It fell in a flash, spilling its contents, a thick, homemade salad dressing, onto Isaiah's arm and shoulder. "Oh!" Linda gasped, frozen in shock as the dressing soaked into Isaiah's shirt. She quickly reached for a towel, but her discomfort and embarrassment held her back from apologizing outright. Isaiah, to his credit, maintained his composure. He took the offered towel, dabbing at his shirt with a calm, almost dignified silence. Emma watched, horrified and uncomfortable, as her mother merely stood by, her discomfort masked by a stiff, polite smile. "It's fine, Mrs. Thompson," Isaiah said softly, his tone polite but distant. He finished wiping his shirt, then nodded to Linda. "Thank you for the business." Without another word, he left, leaving a silence in his wake that felt tenser than any argument. Emma couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort that had settled in her chest after Isaiah left. His calm acceptance of her mother's mistake felt like a quiet reminder of something she hadn't fully realized. An unspoken divide that ran through her family's interactions, one that left her feeling confused and, for the first time, a little ashamed. She returned to her room after breakfast, trying to focus on her schoolwork, but her mind kept wandering back to Isaiah. She thought of the way he'd held himself, even as her mother stood by awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to acknowledge her own mistake. It bothered her, this silent acceptance of what had happened, as though an apology was unnecessary. She wanted to bring it up with her mother, to ask why she hadn't apologized, but something held her back. Deep down, she knew her mother wouldn't understand. Her father, too, had acted like nothing was wrong, as though Isaiah's discomfort was too insignificant to notice. The thought left a bitter taste in Emma's mouth. She'd always looked up to her parents, admiring their success and confidence, but now she wondered if there was something missing in their perfect lives, a sense of empathy that she hadn't fully understood until now. Days passed, but the memory of the incident lingered in Emma's mind. She found herself observing her parents with a new perspective, noticing the small ways in which they seemed to hold themselves apart from people they didn't consider one of them. It was in the way her mother turned her nose up at unfamiliar faces on their street, or how her father dismissed anyone he deemed unimportant. She hadn't paid attention to these things before, but now they stood out in stark relief. And with each passing day, she felt a growing desire to understand why her parents acted this way, and whether it was something she wanted to inherit. Her parents, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to her change in attitude. Jack continued with his work, taking on more hours to deal with a recent downturn at his law firm, while Linda focused on her household duties, oblivious to her daughter's quiet rebellion. One afternoon, while walking home from school, Emma ran into Mrs. Caldwell, an elderly woman who had lived in Woodcrest Pines since its founding. She was tending to her roses when Emma stopped to say hello, feeling a rare moment of connection with her neighbor. "Oh, hello, Emma," Mrs. Caldwell said with a warm smile. "How are you, dear?" Emma hesitated, then blurted out the question that had been on her mind. "Mrs. Caldwell, do you know Isaiah Harper? The delivery man's?" Mrs. Caldwell's eyes lit up with a knowing smile. "Oh yes, I know Isaiah. He's a good man. His family's been connected to this neighborhood for years, you know." Emma was taken aback. "Really? I didn't know that." "Yes, his father was one of the first people to invest in Woodcrest Pines. He bought properties here back when they were just starting to build the neighborhood. He believed in creating a community where everyone could feel welcome." Emma felt a pang of surprise. "So, Isaiah owns property here?" "Oh yes, several houses, actually. He doesn't make a fuss about it, though. Just goes about his work, keeps things in order. That's the kind of person he is, quiet but steady." Emma thanked Mrs. Caldwell, her mind spinning with the revelation. She'd assumed Isaiah was just another delivery driver, someone her parents saw as disposable. But the truth was different. He was a man of quiet influence, a part of the very community her parents held so dear. Emma decided to keep her discovery to herself, at least for now. She wanted her parents to come to their own realization, to see Isaiah for who he truly was without her intervention. She knew that telling them outright might only make them defensive. But as the days passed, she found herself looking forward to Isaiah's visits, eager to offer a small act of kindness that felt like a silent apology for her family's treatment of him. She greeted him warmly each time he arrived, helping him carry bags and asking him about his day. Her parents noticed but said nothing, though she sensed their disapproval in the way her mother's lips tightened whenever she addressed him. Isaiah, for his part, accepted her gestures with quiet gratitude, his demeanor respectful yet reserved. Emma knew he sensed the tension in her home, but he never commented on it, his silence speaking volumes. For Emma, Each interaction was a small act of defiance, a way of rejecting her family's assumptions and embracing a different view of the world. She didn't know where it would lead, but she felt a sense of purpose that filled her with a quiet strength. As the days passed, Emma's resolve to bridge the distance between her family and Isaiah grew. She found herself more attentive during his visits, asking polite questions about his day, his work, and, when she sensed he felt comfortable, his family. Isaiah, though reserved, gradually opened up. He told her about his late father, a man who had quietly invested in real estate throughout the town, including Woodcrest Pines, and had instilled in him values of hard work, humility, and kindness. Emma found herself moved by Isaiah's stories, seeing in him a strength that she admired. Each of his visits became a moment of connection in her week, a chance to engage with someone who saw the world in a way that felt grounded and real, so unlike the polished perfection her parents clung to. Linda, however, grew visibly uncomfortable with Emma's increasing interest in Isaiah's visits. She often hurried to finish the transactions herself, trying to usher Isaiah out quickly, as if to minimize his presence in their home. But Emma's quiet defiance persisted, a subtle challenge to her mother's discomfort. One morning, as they were clearing breakfast dishes, Linda finally broached the subject. "You know, Emma," Linda began, her voice calm but edged with tension. "I've noticed you spend a lot of time chatting with that delivery man. It's nice that you're polite, but there's no need to linger, you know?" Emma met her mother's gaze, sensing the implied disapproval behind Linda's words. "He's interesting, Mom. I like talking to him." Linda's lips pressed into a thin line, and she looked away, busying herself with stacking plates. "It's good to be polite, of course. But remember, we don't need to get too familiar. We have our lives, and he has his." Emma didn't respond immediately, choosing her words carefully. "Mom, don't you think he's part of this neighborhood too? I mean, his father was one of the first people to buy property here." Linda glanced up, a hint of surprise flashing in her eyes. "Who told you that?" "Mrs. Caldwell," Emma said simply. She saw her mother's face tighten, and she continued, "I just think it's interesting. It feels like there's more to this neighborhood than I thought." Linda gave a small, tight smile. "There's a reason we chose Woodcrest Pines, Emma. It's a good community, a safe place to live. But we don't need to know everyone's business." Emma didn't push the matter further, sensing that her mother's views weren't likely to change overnight. But her curiosity remained, and as she went about her day, she found herself thinking of Isaiah's quiet strength, the way he'd handled the dressing spill without a hint of resentment. She resolved to keep learning about his life, even if it meant keeping her questions to herself. Jack returned home late one evening after a long day at the firm. The financial pressures had been building, and he was feeling the weight of an uncertain future. As he hung up his coat, he found Linda waiting for him in the kitchen, her expression concerned. "Rough day?" she asked gently, handing him a glass of water. Jack sighed, taking a sip and nodding. "It's been a challenging month. We've lost a couple of big clients, and I might have to start making some changes." He glanced toward the living room where Emma was reading, lowering his voice. "I've been thinking, we might need to consider renting out the house for a while, just until things stabilize." Linda looked startled. "Rent out our home?" "But Jack." "It's temporary, Linda. Just a few months," he said, his tone steady but strained. "We'll need permission from the association, though. I've heard that since Isaiah's family owns a lot of the properties, he's involved in approving rentals." Linda frowned slightly, her discomfort returning. "Isaiah, approving our rental? That's unexpected." Jack nodded, though he didn't seem as concerned as she was. "It's just a formality. I'll talk to him about it." Emma, overhearing their conversation, couldn't help but feel a thrill of satisfaction at the thought. She wondered if this might be the turning point, the moment her parents would finally start seeing Isaiah as more than just a delivery driver. As she watched her father's face, she sensed his pride would make this process challenging, but she held on to hope. Perhaps her family was finally beginning to see past their assumptions, to recognize the person behind the role. The next time Isaiah visited, Emma felt compelled to ask him about his family's connection to Woodcrest Pines. She knew her parents wouldn't approve of her curiosity, but her desire for understanding outweighed her fear of their disapproval. Isaiah set down the last of the grocery bags and glanced around, sensing her hesitation. "Everything all right, Emma?" She nodded, her cheeks flushing slightly. I just wanted to ask about your dad. Mrs. Caldwell mentioned that he invested in this neighborhood a long time ago." Isaiah's face softened, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "He did. My father was a strong believer in building communities. He wanted to make sure there were places where people from all walks of life could feel welcome, safe." Emma felt a warmth in her chest as she listened, captivated by Isaiah's quiet dedication. "That's amazing. I never thought about Woodcrest Pines that way." Isaiah looked at her thoughtfully. "Your family has lived here a long time, I imagine?" Emma nodded. "Since I was a kid, but it always felt like, I don't know, like there were rules about who belonged and who didn't." Isaiah's eyes met hers, a gentle understanding in his gaze. "Sometimes people build walls without realizing it, but it's never too late to open the door." Emma smiled, feeling a sense of connection she hadn't felt before. She knew her parents might not understand yet, but in that moment, she felt certain that there was more to Woodcrest Pines, and to Isaiah, than they'd ever allowed themselves to see. One evening, as Linda was preparing dinner, Jack entered the kitchen with an uncharacteristic look of hesitation on his face. "I met with Isaiah today about the rental," he said, his tone guarded. Linda looked up, surprised. "And? What did he say?" "He was very professional," Jack admitted, almost grudgingly. "He didn't make a fuss, just asked a few questions, and then said he'd be happy to work with us to get everything in order." Linda felt a flicker of surprise at the praise in her husband's voice. "Did you learn anything else about him?" Jack paused, clearly reluctant to admit it, but finally nodded. "He talked about his father, about how much it meant to him to maintain this community, to keep it a place where people felt they belonged. It made me realize I've probably been a little too quick to judge." Linda absorbed this, her usual composure shaken. She glanced at her daughter, who had been quietly listening from the other side of the kitchen. Emma gave her a small, encouraging smile, her eyes bright with a sense of hope. As the weeks passed, Linda found herself reflecting on her family's place in Woodcrest Pines and on the silent barriers they had created. She began to question the judgments she had once held so tightly, the assumptions that had colored her interactions with people like Isaiah. One morning, as she was cleaning the kitchen, she spotted a spill on the floor near the spot where Isaiah had stood during the dressing incident. The memory came back to her, vivid and uncomfortable, and she felt a pang of regret. She had brushed off the incident, assuming it was too trivial to warrant an apology. But now, as she thought about it, she realized her silence had been a quiet act of dismissal, a refusal to acknowledge the person Isaiah truly was. Taking a deep breath, Linda resolved to make things right. She would apologize not out of obligation, but because she wanted to show the same respect he had shown them. The next time Isaiah arrived with their delivery, Linda greeted him with a smile that was softer, warmer than before. "Good morning, Isaiah," she said, her voice steady but sincere. "I wanted to thank you for being so patient with us. I know we haven't always been fair." Isaiah looked at her, his gaze kind but measured. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. That means a lot." Emma, watching from the hallway, felt a surge of pride for her mother. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was a step, a small act of kindness that spoke volumes. In that quiet exchange, Linda felt the first glimmer of something new, a willingness to open herself to a different way of seeing the world, to step beyond the walls she had built so carefully around her life. It was a beginning, and for the first time she felt hopeful. In the following weeks, Emma's quiet influence became more noticeable. Her stories about her volunteering work at the community center and her respectful curiosity about the world beyond Woodcrest Pines began to shape the family's conversations. Jack listened with interest as Emma shared stories from the community center, her voice animated as she described the people she met and the lessons she learned. He began to see the world through her eyes, a place filled with people who were complex, resilient, and deserving of the same respect he had once reserved only for those within his narrow circle. For Linda, too, Emma's stories opened a new perspective. She found herself looking beyond the surface of things, questioning the assumptions she'd once accepted without thought. Slowly, the Thompsons began to shift, their lives evolving in small but meaningful ways. Emma's relationship with her parents had never been particularly rebellious, but recently, a silent tension had crept into their interactions. It started with her frequent conversations about Isaiah and his family's legacy, a topic her parents had begun to treat with quiet discomfort. Though they rarely voiced their disapproval openly, Emma felt the sting of it in the way her mother's eyes narrowed whenever she mentioned Isaiah's name, or how her father's jaw tightened when she shared stories from the community center. Emma tried to keep the peace, balancing her respect for her parents with her growing admiration for Isaiah. But the strain was becoming undeniable, and she often found herself at odds with their viewpoints. One Sunday afternoon, while sitting at the kitchen table with her mother, Emma brought up the annual neighborhood event she'd recently heard Isaiah mention. "It sounds amazing, Mom," Emma said, her voice hopeful. "It's a chance for everyone in the neighborhood to come together. I think it'd be great for us to go this year." Linda hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly around the handle of her teacup. "We haven't gone in the past, Emma. It's just a bit of a production, don't you think?" Emma sensed her mother's resistance but pressed on gently. "But wouldn't it be nice to connect with people? I think it could help us see things differently, maybe even understand why Isaiah values this place so much." Linda's face softened, but she didn't respond. Emma saw the brief flicker of discomfort in her mother's eyes, a reflection of the walls she had built around herself over the years. Though she wanted to bring her mother into her world, she knew that the change would have to come slowly, one small step at a time. A few days later, Isaiah arrived at the Thompsons' door as usual, but this time Emma was waiting for him outside. She wanted to catch him alone, eager to learn more about his father's vision for Woodcrest Pines and the values he held dear. She greeted him with a warm smile, feeling a sense of excitement she hadn't felt in a long time. "Isaiah, can I help you with the bags?" she offered, reaching for one of the lighter ones. Isaiah chuckled, handing her a bag with a nod of gratitude. "Thank you, Emma. Always nice to have an extra pair of hands." They walked toward the house in comfortable silence, and once they reached the door, Emma hesitated. "Isaiah, would you mind if I asked you more about your father? I mean, I know he owned a lot of property here, but I'd love to understand what it meant to him." Isaiah looked at her, his expression thoughtful. He could see the genuine curiosity in her eyes, the quiet eagerness to learn. "My father was a man of few words," he began, his voice warm with memory. "He believed that a neighborhood was more than just a place to live. It was a community, a place where people cared about one another. He used to say that everyone should feel welcome, no matter who they are." Emma felt a surge of admiration for the man she had never met but whose legacy had shaped the very streets she called home. "That's beautiful. I think it's something I've only just started to understand." Isaiah nodded. "It takes time, but the important thing is that you're open to it. That's what my father would have valued most." Their conversation was interrupted by Linda, who had noticed them from the window and came out with a faintly disapproving look on her face. "Emma, sweetheart, I think Isaiah has other deliveries to make," she said, her tone polite but unmistakably firm. Isaiah offered a courteous nod and began to leave, but Emma felt a pang of frustration. She wanted to learn more, to understand the values that had shaped Isaiah's life. But her mother's resistance reminded her that there was still a divide between them, a gap that seemed to widen with each passing day. That evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Emma decided to test the waters, eager to see if her parents were ready to consider a new perspective. "So, Isaiah told me a little more about his father's vision for the neighborhood," she began, hoping to spark a conversation. Jack looked up from his plate, a slight frown crossing his face. "Emma, I know you've taken an interest in him, but don't you think it's a bit much?" Linda added, "It's nice that you're curious, honey, but we don't need to dig too deeply into other people's lives. There's a certain boundary we keep." Emma felt a surge of frustration, her face flushing. But isn't that the problem, Mom? We keep these boundaries, but we don't know anything about the people around us. We just assume things without ever really seeing who they are. Linda stiffened, clearly caught off guard by her daughter's words. Emma, that's not fair. We've always been respectful to our neighbors. Respectful, sure, Emma replied, her voice quiet but firm. But we're not open to understanding them. The silence that followed was tense, each member of the family grappling with the weight of Emma's words. Jack and Linda exchanged a look, their expressions uncertain, as if they were seeing their daughter in a new light. Jack lay awake that night, his mind swirling with Emma's words. For the first time, he felt a crack in the shield of certainty that he had built around his beliefs. He had always prided himself on being a man of principle, someone who valued fairness and hard work. But Emma's words had struck a nerve, forcing him to question whether he had truly lived by those values or simply adopted them as part of his identity. The next morning, as he drove to work, he found himself reflecting on Isaiah's influence on his daughter. Though he'd been wary of it at first, he realized now that Isaiah had shown Emma something he himself had failed to provide. A sense of humility, a willingness to see beyond appearances. That day, Jack decided. He would reach out to Isaiah, not as a neighbor or a client, but as a man seeking to understand. It was a small step, but he felt that it was time to bridge the gap he had allowed to grow. Later that afternoon, while dusting the living room shelves, Linda's gaze fell on a framed family photo. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the edges as memories flooded back. Birthdays, holidays, the milestones that had marked their lives. But now, those memories felt tinged with a sense of regret, as if she'd overlooked something essential. For years, Linda had clung to the idea of perfection, of living up to a standard that felt safe, familiar. But her daughter's words had shaken her, leaving her feeling exposed and uncertain. She wondered if, in her pursuit of a perfect life, she had closed herself off from the world, creating boundaries that had prevented her from seeing people for who they truly were. As she set the photo back on the shelf, Linda felt a flicker of determination. She wasn't sure how to change, but she knew it was time to start. She resolved to keep an open mind, to listen and observe, and, if she could, to try to understand the world through Emma's eyes. The next week, Jack invited Isaiah for a coffee at the local cafe, a place where they could speak without the formality of their usual interactions. Isaiah accepted the invitation with his usual quiet grace, and as they settled into a corner booth, Jack felt a mixture of nervousness and relief. For a while, they spoke about ordinary things, work, family, the small details of their lives. But eventually, Jack brought up the question that had been weighing on him. I don't think I've ever really taken the time to understand what this neighborhood means to you, he admitted, his voice hesitant. I realize now that maybe I've made assumptions about you, and I regret that. Isaiah listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. It's easy to make assumptions, Jack. I don't hold it against you. We all see the world through our own experiences. Jack nodded, feeling a wave of humility. Thank you for saying that. I think my family and I are trying to see things differently. Emma's been a big part of that. She looks up to you, you know? Isaiah smiled, a quiet gratitude in his eyes. Emma has a good heart. She's open to the world in a way that's rare these days. I'm honored if I've been a small part of that. Their conversation continued, flowing easily now, and by the time they left the cafe, Jack felt a sense of relief, a weight lifted from his shoulders. He had taken the first step, and though he knew there was much work to be done, he felt hopeful for the first time. The next time Isaiah delivered their groceries, Linda met him at the door. She felt a nervous flutter in her chest, but she steeled herself, determined to follow through. Isaiah, she began, her voice steady but sincere. I just wanted to apologize for that incident with the dressing. I didn't handle it well, and I regret not saying sorry sooner. Isaiah looked at her, his expression warm but measured. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I appreciate that. Linda felt a wave of relief, as if a burden she hadn't fully recognized was finally lifted. She nodded, a soft smile on her lips. It means a lot, and thank you for the example you've set. I'm realizing there's a lot I can learn from people who see the world differently. Isaiah nodded in understanding, and with that simple exchange, Linda felt a shift in herself. A willingness to let go of the rigid standards she'd clung to and open herself to a new way of seeing the world. In the days that followed, Emma's subtle influence continued to weave through the household. Her stories from the community center and her enthusiasm for Isaiah's values became a regular part of their conversations. And for the first time, the Thompsons began to consider the world beyond the boundaries of Woodcrest Pines. Jack found himself sharing Emma's stories at work, drawing inspiration from her commitment to inclusivity and understanding. Linda began volunteering at the local library, helping with programs for families from different backgrounds. The changes were small, but they were real, a testament to Emma's quiet but powerful impact on her family. In the end, it was Emma's openness, her willingness to see beyond the surface, that had sparked a transformation in the Thompsons. They were no longer the same family, and though their journey was far from over, they felt ready to face the future with a renewed sense of purpose. One Sunday morning, as Linda was organizing the pantry, the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Mrs. Caldwell, their elderly neighbor, standing on the porch with a warm smile. In her hands, she held a basket of freshly baked cookies, wrapped in a gingham cloth. "Good morning, Linda," Mrs. Caldwell greeted her cheerfully. "I wanted to drop these off as a little thank you. I noticed you helped set up for the neighborhood event last week." Linda's initial surprise softened into a pleased smile. "Oh, Mrs. Caldwell, that was so kind of you. Thank you." As they exchanged pleasantries, Mrs. Caldwell's gaze drifted toward the street, where Isaiah was just pulling up for his deliveries. She turned back to Linda with a curious look. "You know, I've known Isaiah's family for years," Mrs. Caldwell said with a thoughtful smile. "His father was one of the first people to invest in this area, back when the neighborhood was still developing." Linda nodded, trying to mask her surprise. "Yes, Emma mentioned something like that. Such a hard-working family," Mrs. Caldwell continued, her voice tinged with admiration. "Isaiah's father believed that a neighborhood should be like a family, where everyone looked out for each other. It's nice to see that Isaiah's carrying on his father's legacy." As Mrs. Caldwell left, Linda closed the door and stood there for a moment, the weight of her words settling over her. She'd spent so long guarding the boundaries of her life, unaware of the rich histories and legacies that lay just beyond her own assumptions. In that quiet moment, Linda realized how little she had truly understood about the people who shared her neighborhood. The following week, Jack invited Isaiah to meet him at the local park. After their initial conversation, Jack had been left with a sense of curiosity, a desire to know more about the values that had shaped Isaiah's life. He wanted to understand, and though he was still grappling with his own assumptions, he felt that another conversation could offer clarity. As they sat on a bench beneath a towering oak tree, Isaiah looked at Jack with a calm but open expression, as if sensing the questions Jack struggled to articulate. "I wanted to thank you again for your help with the rental," Jack began, choosing his words carefully. "It's opened my eyes to some things I hadn't considered before." Isaiah nodded, his gaze steady. "Change doesn't come easy, Jack. It takes humility, a willingness to let go of what we thought we knew." Jack sighed, feeling the weight of those words. "You know, I used to think that I was open-minded, but I realize now that I've kept people at a distance without even knowing it." Isaiah's expression softened, a quiet understanding in his eyes. "We all have our own journeys. What matters is that you're open to growth." They spoke for a while longer, their conversation flowing with a new sense of ease. Jack left the park that day with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to honor the values he'd glimpsed in Isaiah, a commitment to kindness, understanding, and the courage to change. Later that evening, Linda found herself alone in the quiet of the living room, lost in thought. The more she reflected on her recent interactions with Isaiah and Mrs. Caldwell, the more she realized how narrow her world had been. She'd spent years building a life around order and appearances, focusing on the image of perfection that Woodcrest Pines represented. But now that image felt hollow. Emma's words echoed in her mind, a quiet reminder of the empathy and compassion she had neglected. She thought of Isaiah, of the dignity with which he carried himself, and felt a pang of regret for the assumptions she had made. Taking a deep breath, Linda resolved to make a change. She would open herself to the world beyond her walls, to see people not for their roles but for who they truly were. The next morning, over breakfast, Linda decided to share her thoughts with her family. She looked at Jack and Emma, her expression thoughtful yet determined. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I realize that I haven't always been open to people, Isaiah included. I think it's time I start trying to understand people for who they are." Emma looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "Really, Mom?" Linda nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "Yes, I want to start volunteering, maybe at the library or the community center. I think it's time I step outside of my comfort zone." Jack reached over, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Linda." The conversation that followed was one of openness and honesty, each member of the family sharing their thoughts and hopes. For the first time, Emma felt that her parents were truly listening, willing to grow alongside her. It was a quiet but profound moment, a step toward a more compassionate future. As the weeks went by, Emma watched her parents with a growing sense of pride and relief. Her mother's determination to volunteer and her father's newfound respect for Isaiah marked a turning point for their family. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that her own journey had sparked something in them, a willingness to embrace change and let go of the walls they had once clung to. She continued her work at the community center, feeling more connected to the world around her than ever before. Each day brought new experiences, new stories that enriched her understanding of people. She realized that the world was vast, filled with people who carried their own histories, their own values, and she was determined to honor that. One evening, Emma ran into Isaiah while volunteering at a community event. She greeted him warmly, feeling a deep respect for the man who had become a quiet but profound influence on her life. "Isaiah, I just wanted to thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude, "for everything you've shown me, and for helping me see the world differently." Isaiah looked at her, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "You didn't need me to see the world differently, Emma. You have that gift already. I just offered a reminder." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both of them feeling the weight of the journey they had shared. Emma knew that Isaiah's legacy wasn't just in the houses he owned, but in the kindness and understanding he brought to those around him. It was a legacy that had woven itself into the fabric of her family, one that would continue to shape their lives in ways she hadn't yet fully realized. As the annual neighborhood gathering approached, the Thompsons decided to attend, feeling a newfound sense of belonging in Woodcrest Pines. They no longer saw it as a place defined by appearances but as a community filled with people of diverse backgrounds and stories. At the gathering, they mingled with their neighbors, exchanging stories and laughter. Linda introduced herself to people she'd never spoken to before, and Jack engaged in conversations that went beyond surface-level pleasantries. When Isaiah arrived, he was greeted warmly, and the Thompsons felt a surge of pride, knowing that they had come to see him not just as their landlord or delivery driver, but as a valued member of their community. As the evening progressed, Emma watched her parents with a quiet smile, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Her family had grown, not just in their relationships with each other but in their understanding of the world. She knew there would still be challenges, moments of doubt and resistance, but she also knew they were ready to face them. In the weeks that followed, the Thompsons continued to open themselves to new experiences and connections. Jack began mentoring young associates at his law firm, offering guidance to those from different backgrounds. Linda expanded her volunteer work, helping organize programs at the library that encouraged literacy and cultural exchange. Emma, meanwhile, continued her journey at the community center, inspired by the values Isaiah's family had instilled in Woodcrest Pines. Their lives were no longer defined by the rigid boundaries they had once clung to. They had learned to let go of their assumptions, to see people for who they truly were, and to embrace the world with humility and kindness. As Emma approached her final year of high school, she began considering her future with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. She wanted to pursue a career that would allow her to make a difference, to carry on the legacy of kindness and understanding that Isaiah and his father had inspired in her. One evening, she shared her dreams with her parents over dinner. "I think I want to study social work," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "I want to help people, to connect with them the way Isaiah has." Jack and Linda exchanged a look, their faces filled with pride. "We couldn't be prouder of you, Emma," Linda said, her voice thick with emotion. In that moment, Emma felt a profound sense of gratitude, knowing that her family's journey had shaped her path. She was ready to embrace the future, carrying with her the lessons of compassion, humility, and the courage to make a difference. Over time, Woodcrest Pines transformed into more than just a neighborhood. It became a community united by shared values and a commitment to kindness. The annual gathering grew to include people from all backgrounds, each person bringing their own stories, traditions, and experiences. Isaiah's quiet influence continued to shape the lives of those around him, his father's legacy living on in the hearts of the people he had touched. And for the Thompsons, life in Woodcrest Pines became a testament to the power of understanding and the strength of a community bound by empathy. They had learned that true belonging didn't come from appearances or status. It came from the willingness to open one's heart and see the world through another's eyes. And in that shared vision, they found a future defined not by boundaries, but by the lasting bonds of respect and compassion. The Thompsons had come a long way from their initial views, but each of them still carried lingering doubts and questions. Emma felt hopeful but occasionally frustrated with her parents' slow acceptance of change, while Jack and Linda found themselves caught between their old assumptions and their newfound awareness. Their path forward was uncertain, but for the first time, they were willing to embrace it. Emma noticed the tension between her parents growing as they wrestled with these changes. Jack often stayed up late, poring over case files from work, while Linda spent hours organizing community events and volunteer activities, as if to make up for the years she'd held herself apart. One night after dinner, Emma decided to confront her parents directly. She felt a surge of courage, driven by a desire to push her family toward true understanding, not just polite tolerance. "Mom, Dad," she began, her voice steady, "do you think we're really changing? Or are we just pretending?" Jack looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean, Emma?" Emma hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I mean, it feels like we're saying all the right things, but are we actually living them? Or are we just putting on a new face for the neighborhood?" Linda shifted uncomfortably, and Jack frowned, clearly unsettled. Emma's words struck a chord, but they also revealed the unspoken tension they'd both been trying to ignore. They knew that understanding and respect had to go deeper than words, but taking that step required a level of humility and honesty they were still learning to embrace. Over the next few weeks, Emma's commitment to change became even more evident. She threw herself into her volunteer work, organizing events at the community center that encouraged people from different backgrounds to share their experiences. She coordinated a storytelling night, inviting community members to talk about their lives, their cultures, and their families' histories. Emma's dedication did not go unnoticed. Jack and Linda watched with a mixture of pride and apprehension, realizing that their daughter was forging a path they hadn't anticipated. She was no longer content to simply talk about change. She wanted to make it happen. One evening, Emma invited her parents to attend the storytelling night at the community center. "You'll get to hear from people who see the world differently," she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "I think it'll help us understand what Isaiah's family believed in." Though initially hesitant, Jack and Linda agreed. They knew this was an opportunity to see the world through Emma's eyes, and perhaps to let go of the final barriers that had held them back. The storytelling night was a powerful experience for Jack and Linda. They listened as people shared stories of resilience, courage, and compassion. Stories of facing prejudice, overcoming hardship, and finding hope in unexpected places. Each story touched them deeply, revealing a world they had only glimpsed from afar. Jack found himself drawn to a young man named Carlos, who shared his journey of immigrating to the United States and building a life for his family. Carlos spoke of the challenges he'd faced, the sacrifices he'd made, and the pride he felt in contributing to his community. Linda, meanwhile, was captivated by an elderly woman named Mrs. Nguyen, who spoke about her family's journey from Vietnam and their struggle to find acceptance in a new country. Her story resonated with Linda in ways she hadn't expected, sparking a sense of empathy that went beyond words. By the end of the evening, both Jack and Linda felt humbled, their perspectives broadened by the stories they had heard. They left the event feeling a newfound respect for the people around them, as well as a deep gratitude for the courage it took to share those stories. That night, after they returned home, Jack and Linda sat together in the living room, reflecting on the stories they had heard. The silence between them was comfortable, yet charged with the weight of their shared experience. Linda finally broke the silence, her voice soft. I think I understand now, Jack. What we've been missing all these years. It's not about keeping up appearances or fitting into a certain mold. It's about seeing people for who they really are. Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. You're right. I used to think that as long as we stayed in our lane, kept to our own lives, we were doing our part. But now I see that that was just another way of avoiding the truth. Linda reached over, taking his hand. We have a lot to make up for, don't we? Jack squeezed her hand, his gaze steady. We do. But I think, thanks to Emma and Isaiah, we're finally moving in the right direction. Their conversation marked a turning point, a quiet commitment to embracing change and letting go of the judgments they had once clung to. They knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time, they felt ready to face it. The next time Isaiah visited, Linda greeted him with genuine warmth, feeling a sense of gratitude she hadn't expressed before. Isaiah, I wanted to thank you, she said, her voice filled with sincerity, for everything you've done, not just for us, but for the neighborhood. I think we're beginning to see things differently because of you. Isaiah gave her a small, understanding smile. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson, but the credit goes to you. Change isn't easy, and it takes courage to let go of old beliefs. Linda felt a surge of emotion, realizing that she'd finally taken that step. She watched as Isaiah turned to leave, feeling a deep sense of respect for the man who had quietly taught her family the value of humility and compassion. As he walked away, Linda turned to Emma, who had been watching the interaction from the kitchen. They shared a smile, a moment of connection that spoke volumes. Emma knew that her mother had come a long way, and she felt a deep sense of pride in the journey they had shared. At work, Jack began to approach his colleagues and clients with a new perspective. He took the time to listen, to understand their backgrounds and experiences, and to see them not as roles but as individuals with their own unique stories. One day, while mentoring a new associate named Samir, Jack listened as the young man shared his family's journey from Syria and the sacrifices they had made to build a life in the United States. Samir spoke with quiet pride, his eyes bright with determination. Jack felt a pang of recognition, a reminder of the stories he had heard at the community center. He realized that each person he encountered carried their own struggles, their own dreams, and that his role wasn't just to lead but to uplift and support them. For the first time in his career, Jack saw his work not as a means of financial success but as a platform for understanding and empathy. It was a revelation that left him feeling both humbled and inspired, a reminder of the quiet strength he had glimpsed in Isaiah. Linda's work at the library became a source of joy and fulfillment. She found herself connecting with families from different backgrounds, learning about their cultures and histories. She helped organize literacy programs for children, watching with pride as they grew more confident in their reading skills. One afternoon, as she was setting up for a storytime session, a young girl named Maya approached her with a shy smile. Maya's family had recently moved to Woodcrest Pines, and Linda remembered feeling uncertain about their presence at first. But now, as she looked at Maya's bright, eager face, she felt only warmth. Would you like to help me set up the books, Maya? Linda asked, her voice gentle. Maya's face lit up, and she nodded enthusiastically. They spent the next hour arranging the books together, sharing stories and laughter. For Linda, it was a simple but profound moment, a reminder that true belonging came not from appearances but from connection. As Emma watched her parents' transformation, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She knew that her family's journey was far from over, but she also knew that they were on the right path. Emma continued to volunteer at the community center, organizing events that encouraged people to connect and share their stories. She felt a growing sense of purpose, a desire to make a difference in the world around her. One evening, she spoke to Isaiah about her dreams of studying social work. "I want to help people the way you do," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination, "to make them feel seen and understood." Isaiah looked at her with pride. "You have a gift, Emma. You have the heart and the vision to make a real impact." Their conversation left Emma feeling inspired, ready to embrace the future with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that her journey had only just begun, and she was eager to see where it would lead. The Thompsons continued to grow, each of them embracing the values of empathy and understanding that Isaiah's family had inspired in them. They attended more community events, connected with their neighbors, and opened their hearts to people from all walks of life. Their home became a place of warmth and acceptance, a reflection of the values they now held dear. And though the journey had been challenging, they knew that it had brought them closer together, united by a shared commitment to compassion. Emma's volunteer work at the community center continued to inspire her. Each day, she encountered people from all backgrounds, each with their own unique stories and perspectives. Her interactions with them opened her mind to a world of experiences beyond her own, and she felt a deepening resolve to contribute to her community. One afternoon, while assisting with a children's art workshop, Emma met a young girl named Lila. Lila's parents had recently moved to the area from a neighboring city, and she was quiet, almost withdrawn, as she colored in a butterfly on her page. Emma knelt beside her, asking softly, "Do you like butterflies?" Lila nodded, her gaze fixed on her drawing. "They're pretty. They can go wherever they want." Emma smiled, sensing a hint of loneliness in Lila's voice. She knew what it felt like to struggle with change, to feel out of place. "That's right. Butterflies are free to explore. Kind of like us, we can grow and change, too." Lila looked up, her eyes brightening with a small smile. In that moment, Emma felt a connection, a realization that she wanted to make others feel seen, understood, and accepted, just as Isaiah had done for her. Emma's interactions with Lila stayed with her, and she found herself bringing her insights home to her family, eager to share her experiences. At dinner, she told Jack and Linda about Lila and the other children she had met at the community center, her enthusiasm evident in her voice. "These kids, they're just amazing," Emma said, her eyes shining. "They've all been through so much, but they still show up, ready to learn and share. It's inspiring." Jack listened, nodding thoughtfully. "You're doing important work, Emma. It's good that you're connecting with people." Linda added, "It sounds like they're lucky to have you, Emma. I'm proud of the way you're handling this." Emma felt a warmth spread through her, grateful for her parents' support. She hoped that her experiences would continue to inspire them, helping them see the value of connection, of looking beyond surface differences to find common ground. At his law firm, Jack found himself increasingly reflective, often thinking about Isaiah's values and how they contrasted with his own past attitudes. He began to question the way he interacted with clients and colleagues, wondering if he had truly understood the importance of empathy in his work. One afternoon, Jack was approached by a junior associate, Samir, who needed guidance on a complex case. Samir explained the challenges he was facing, and Jack noticed the young man's nervousness, the way he hesitated, as though uncertain of his place. Normally, Jack would have offered brief, efficient advice, but this time he decided to take a different approach. He listened carefully, giving Samir his full attention, and encouraged him to share his thoughts and ideas. As they talked, Jack realized that Samir's insights were valuable, offering a fresh perspective on the case. For the first time, Jack understood that mentorship wasn't just about imparting knowledge. It was about respecting and nurturing others' contributions. It was a revelation that left him feeling both humbled and inspired. Afterward, Jack thanked Samir for his input, watching as the young man's face lit up with gratitude. In that moment, Jack felt a sense of purpose, a reminder that he had the power to create a positive impact by truly valuing others' perspectives. Meanwhile, Linda continued her volunteer work at the library, finding herself increasingly invested in the families she encountered. She'd started helping with a weekly reading program, watching as children of various backgrounds gathered around to listen to stories that celebrated diversity and inclusion. One morning, Linda met Sophia, a mother of 3 who had recently moved to the area. Sophia shared that her family was adjusting to a new environment, facing challenges in finding a sense of belonging. "We feel a bit like outsiders," Sophia admitted, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "It's hard to settle in when you're not sure how others see you." Linda felt a pang of recognition. She remembered her own initial hesitation toward Isaiah and the assumptions she'd once held. Realizing how easily those assumptions could create barriers, Linda offered a gentle smile. "You're welcome here, Sophia," she said softly. "This community wouldn't be the same without you and your family." Sophia's face softened, and Linda felt a deep sense of fulfillment. For the first time, she understood that her role wasn't just about volunteering. It was about fostering an environment of acceptance. She resolved to continue building connections, to honor Isaiah's father's legacy by extending kindness to those who sought a place to belong. One weekend, as Emma was walking to the local cafe, she spotted Isaiah at a distance, talking with Mrs. Caldwell. She felt a surge of gratitude toward him and decided to approach, hoping to express how much he had inspired her family's journey. "Isaiah," she called out, catching his attention as she hurried over. Isaiah turned, greeting her with a warm smile. "Emma, it's good to see you." They exchanged pleasantries, and Emma hesitated before speaking, her voice filled with sincerity. "I wanted to thank you, Isaiah. My family and we're starting to see things differently because of you. You've shown us what it means to really see people, to understand them." Isaiah's expression softened, and he nodded thoughtfully. "Emma, you and your family are doing the work. Change comes from within. I'm glad if I could help, but this journey is yours." Emma felt a surge of pride and purpose, knowing that their path had been shaped by the quiet strength of a man who saw the world with kindness and compassion. As the weeks went by, Jack and Linda realized they still had one more step to take. They wanted to formally apologize to Isaiah, to express their gratitude and acknowledge the assumptions they had once held. They decided to invite him over for dinner, hoping he would accept. When Isaiah arrived, they greeted him warmly, ushering him into their home. After a pleasant meal, Jack cleared his throat, feeling a wave of humility as he looked at Isaiah. "Isaiah, there's something we've been wanting to say," Jack began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We owe you an apology. We've made assumptions, and we've taken your presence for granted. But over the past few months, you've shown us what it truly means to be part of a community." Isaiah listened quietly, his face unreadable, but his eyes reflected understanding. Linda added, "Thank you, Isaiah, for your patience and kindness. You've taught us to see people differently, to look beyond what we thought we knew." Isaiah nodded, a gentle smile crossing his face. "Thank you for your honesty. We're all learning, growing. That's what community is about." As he left that evening, the Thompsons felt a sense of peace and closure. They knew their journey was far from over, but they felt ready to continue it, guided by the lessons they had learned from Isaiah. The annual neighborhood gathering was approaching, and this year, Emma wanted to make it special. She suggested that the Thompsons host a small gathering at their home the evening before, inviting their neighbors to share stories and connect on a deeper level. Jack and Linda agreed, feeling a newfound sense of purpose. They invited people from across the neighborhood, including families they hadn't interacted with before. They wanted to create an environment that honored Isaiah's father's vision of Woodcrest Pines, a place where everyone could feel welcome. On the evening of the gathering, the Thompsons' home was filled with laughter, stories, and shared experiences. People from different backgrounds and walks of life came together, sharing memories, dreams, and aspirations. Jack and Linda moved through the crowd, feeling a profound sense of connection with their neighbors. Emma watched her family with pride, knowing that they had come full circle. They were no longer bound by the narrow views they had once held. They were now part of a community united by understanding and respect. A few days after the gathering, Emma found a letter from Isaiah waiting in their mailbox. She opened it eagerly, her heart swelling as she read his words of gratitude and encouragement. In the letter, Isaiah wrote about his own journey, his family's legacy, and the values that had shaped his life. He expressed his pride in the Thompsons, acknowledging their willingness to grow and change. "Your family has shown me that change is possible," he wrote. "You've opened your hearts, and in doing so, you've created a space where others feel safe to do the same. This is the legacy my father dreamed of, a place where people could come together, see each other, and celebrate what makes us all unique." Emma felt a surge of emotion as she read the letter, her heart brimming with gratitude. She knew that her family's journey was far from over, but she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing they had Isaiah's guidance and support. As the months passed, the Thompsons continued to embrace their journey of growth and connection. Jack became a mentor at work, encouraging his colleagues to value empathy and understanding. Linda expanded her volunteer efforts, organizing programs that celebrated cultural diversity and fostered community. Emma, inspired by Isaiah's letter, began to consider a future in social work, hoping to create spaces where others could feel seen and valued. She wanted to carry on the legacy that had shaped her life, to honor the values her family had come to embrace. Jack's law firm had been struggling for months, and the financial strain was beginning to show. One morning, after a particularly rough week, Jack received news that a major client had decided to go with another firm. It was a setback he hadn't anticipated, and it left him grappling with uncertainty about the future. That evening, as he sat at the dinner table with Linda and Emma, Jack tried to hide his frustration, but Emma noticed the tension in his expression. "Everything okay, Dad?" she asked, her voice gentle. Jack hesitated before responding. "We lost a client at the firm. It's going to affect our finances, at least for a little while. I might need to consider renting out the house temporarily." Linda's eyes widened, clearly taken aback by the idea. "Rent out our home?" Jack nodded, though he felt uneasy about the decision. "It's only temporary. But there's a catch. According to the neighborhood association, we need approval from the property owner. In our case, that means Isaiah." Emma felt a surge of hope and curiosity. "So, you'll have to talk to him directly?" Jack nodded again, though he looked troubled. He hadn't imagined needing Isaiah's help, and the irony wasn't lost on him. But he knew that he had no other option. The next day, Jack arranged to meet Isaiah at a local cafe, hoping to discuss the rental request in person. He arrived early, his mind racing with a mixture of pride and discomfort. When Isaiah walked in, Jack stood up, greeting him with a respectful nod. "Thank you for meeting with me, Isaiah," Jack began, trying to maintain his usual confidence. "I wanted to discuss the possibility of renting out our home for a short time." Isaiah listened calmly, his expression neutral but attentive. "I understand, Jack. I'm happy to help however I can. Just let me know the details, and I'll see what we can arrange." Jack was surprised by Isaiah's willingness to assist, and a sense of humility washed over him. He realized that Isaiah had every reason to hold a grudge, yet he remained open and supportive. "Thank you, Isaiah," Jack said, his voice sincere. "I appreciate your understanding. I know I've made assumptions in the past, and I regret that. You've shown me that there's more to being part of a community than I'd realized." Isaiah smiled gently, nodding. "We're all learning, Jack. That's the beauty of community. We support each other, even when it's unexpected." Jack left the cafe feeling a newfound respect for Isaiah, humbled by his kindness and generosity. The interaction left him determined to approach his own life with a similar sense of compassion and openness. When Jack returned home and shared his conversation with Linda, she listened intently, absorbing his words with quiet thoughtfulness. She hadn't realized how much they had relied on Isaiah's goodwill, nor had she considered the humility it took for Jack to ask for help. Over the next few days, Linda found herself reflecting on her own role in the community. She'd been volunteering at the library, making small connections with families, but now she felt a desire to go deeper, to truly understand the people around her. One afternoon, while working on a community event for the library, Linda approached a woman named Priya, who had recently moved to the area. They exchanged introductions, and Linda asked about Priya's experience adjusting to the neighborhood. "It's been a bit of a challenge," Priya admitted, smiling warmly. "Moving to a new place always comes with a learning curve. But I'm grateful for the people who've welcomed us." Linda felt a pang of guilt, realizing that she hadn't always been as welcoming to newcomers herself. Determined to change, she spent the rest of the afternoon helping Priya with the event preparations, learning about her background and experiences. By the end of the day, Linda felt a renewed sense of purpose, inspired by Priya's resilience and optimism. Meanwhile, Emma continued to make an impact on her family through her quiet encouragement and dedication to inclusivity. She'd been organizing events at the community center, encouraging her parents to attend and experience the diverse perspectives of their neighbors. One evening, Emma invited Linda to join her for a cultural celebration at the center, explaining that it was an event meant to showcase different traditions and bring people together. Linda hesitated at first, feeling slightly out of place. But Emma's enthusiasm was contagious, and she found herself agreeing to attend. Together, they immersed themselves in the festivities, watching performances, tasting foods from various cultures, and listening to stories shared by community members. At one point, a young woman named Rosa performed a traditional dance, sharing her family's history of migration and perseverance. Linda felt moved, recognizing that these stories were similar to her own family's journey in past generations. She saw herself in Rosa's story, and in that moment, she understood the strength that came from embracing diversity. Emma noticed the shift in her mother's expression, a look of understanding and empathy that hadn't been there before. She felt a sense of pride, knowing that her family was changing, one small step at a time. As Jack continued to mentor younger associates at his firm, he found himself drawing on the lessons he'd learned from Isaiah and Emma. He encouraged his colleagues to approach their work with empathy, to see clients not as cases but as people with unique stories and struggles. One day, a new associate named Ahmed asked Jack for advice on handling a sensitive case involving a client from a different cultural background. Jack took the time to listen, offering guidance that emphasized the importance of understanding and respect. Ahmed thanked him, his gratitude evident. "You're a rare mentor, Jack. Not everyone takes the time to listen the way you do." Jack smiled, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. For the first time in his career, he saw his role not just as a leader, but as a guide, someone who could help others grow and connect on a deeper level. It was a lesson he'd learned from Isaiah, and he was determined to carry it forward. As the annual neighborhood gathering approached, the Thompsons decided to take a more active role in organizing the event. They reached out to Isaiah and Mrs. Caldwell, offering to host a portion of the gathering at their home as a way of fostering unity and connection. When the day arrived, the Thompsons welcomed their neighbors with open arms, their home filled with laughter, music, and shared stories. Families from all backgrounds gathered, celebrating their unique traditions and experiences while finding common ground. Jack and Linda moved through the crowd, engaging with people they hadn't known before, exchanging stories, and forming new friendships. Emma watched with a sense of pride, knowing that her family had come full circle. As the evening drew to a close, Isaiah approached the Thompsons, a warm smile on his face. "Thank you for hosting this, Jack, Linda. It's moments like these that bring us together, that remind us of what truly matters." Jack shook his hand, his gratitude evident. "Thank you, Isaiah, for everything. You've taught us what it means to be part of a community, and we're grateful." Isaiah nodded, his expression filled with understanding. "We're all part of something bigger than ourselves, Jack. And that's what makes life meaningful." As the weeks passed, the Thompsons continued to embrace their roles as active members of the community. They attended events, supported local initiatives, and worked to foster a sense of belonging for all their neighbors. Emma continued her work at the community center, inspired by the values Isaiah had instilled in her. She was more determined than ever to pursue a future in social work, hoping to create spaces where people could feel valued and understood. One evening, she shared her dreams with her parents over dinner. "I want to help people find a place to belong, to feel safe and respected," she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "Just like Isaiah has done for us." Jack and Linda exchanged a proud look, their faces filled with admiration. "We're so proud of you, Emma," Linda said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "You're honoring Isaiah's legacy in a way that's truly meaningful." Isaiah continued to be a steady presence in the neighborhood, quietly supporting those around him with his kindness and wisdom. Though he didn't seek recognition, his influence was felt by everyone he encountered, a reminder of the power of humility and compassion. The Thompsons knew that they owed much of their growth to Isaiah, and they made a point to express their gratitude whenever they had the chance. They understood that his impact went beyond words. It was a testament to the values he embodied and the example he set. As they looked toward the future, the Thompsons felt a deep sense of purpose, committed to carrying on the lessons they had learned from Isaiah. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face it with open hearts and a renewed sense of community. Woodcrest Pines had transformed into a community united by shared values and a commitment to kindness. The Thompsons were no longer defined by their assumptions or insecurities. They were part of a neighborhood built on empathy, respect, and the courage to grow. Their home became a gathering place for friends, neighbors, and families from all backgrounds, each person bringing their own unique experiences and perspectives. It reflected the legacy Isaiah's father had envisioned, a place where people could come together, see each other, and celebrate what made them unique. Emma looked around at her family, feeling a deep sense of pride. She knew that they had come a long way, and though their journey had been challenging, it had brought them closer to each other and to their community. The Thompsons' open embrace of community values began to ripple outward, touching the lives of their neighbors and fostering an atmosphere of acceptance in Woodcrest Pines. Word spread about Jack and Linda's shift in perspective, and their willingness to connect with neighbors brought an openness to the once exclusive street. Families who had once felt like outsiders now felt a new sense of welcome. Linda, inspired by her recent volunteer experiences, reached out to other residents, encouraging them to get involved in local causes. She organized a neighborhood newsletter, highlighting community events, volunteer opportunities, and sharing profiles of the families who lived there. One feature story was about Isaiah, detailing his family's legacy and commitment to the neighborhood. Linda had hesitated to ask him, worried about appearing intrusive, but Isaiah graciously agreed, providing her with a few words about his father's dream of a united, welcoming community. The story sparked interest throughout Woodcrest Pines, bringing Isaiah's legacy into the spotlight and reminding the residents of the values upon which their neighborhood was built. Meanwhile, Emma took her community involvement to the next level, inspired by the stories she'd heard from her neighbors. With Isaiah's support, she organized a program called Neighbor Nights, a monthly gathering at the community center where residents could share their own stories, talents, and cultures. The first Neighbor Night was a success, with people from all backgrounds coming together to celebrate their unique traditions. Emma watched as her neighbors mingled, sharing laughter and conversation, and felt a deep sense of pride. She knew that her family's journey had made a difference, not just within their own home but throughout the community. During one Neighbor Night, Emma invited Isaiah to share his family's history in Woodcrest Pines. Isaiah spoke of his father's vision, his hopes for a community where people respected and supported one another. His words resonated deeply with the attendees, many of whom hadn't known the full extent of Isaiah's role in building and nurturing the neighborhood. Emma felt grateful to witness the shift in her community, knowing that Isaiah's influence had touched every person present. Jack continued to reflect on his family's transformation, grateful for the journey they had taken together. He had grown close to his neighbors, especially to Isaiah, who had shown him what it meant to lead with humility and respect. Jack's mindset had shifted, and he now saw his role in the community as one of support and mentorship. At work, Jack started a pro bono initiative, offering legal guidance to local families and small business owners who couldn't afford traditional legal services. His goal was to give back, to create opportunities for people in his community. He recognized that the neighborhood he'd once viewed as an exclusive enclave was, in fact, a place that thrived through diversity and inclusion. One evening, as he sat with Linda on the porch, Jack shared his feelings. I don't think I would have ever come to this realization if it hadn't been for Isaiah. He's shown us a different way of living, one that's more connected and purposeful. Linda nodded, her gaze thoughtful. He's done so much simply by being who he is, and I think we're better for it. In that quiet moment, they both felt the weight of their gratitude, a deep appreciation for the man who had guided them toward a more meaningful life. Linda's involvement in the neighborhood had deepened as well, and she took on the role of coordinator for Woodcrest Pines' first community cultural festival. She worked with Emma and other residents to organize the event, bringing together families from all backgrounds to share their heritage through food, music, and art. The day of the festival was vibrant, with booths representing various cultures, offering everything from Mexican tamales to Vietnamese spring rolls, all made by local families. Linda felt a sense of fulfillment as she watched neighbors who had once kept to themselves come forward, proudly sharing their stories and traditions. When Isaiah arrived, Linda approached him, her face filled with gratitude. Isaiah, I don't think I would have done any of this without your example. Thank you for showing us what it means to open our hearts. Isaiah gave her a kind smile, his voice warm. You're the one who made the choice, Linda. Your willingness to embrace change has made all the difference. Linda felt a sense of peace, knowing that her efforts were not only a reflection of her growth but a continuation of Isaiah's family legacy. She was proud to contribute to a community that celebrated its people. One Saturday afternoon, Isaiah invited Emma to visit his home, sharing stories about his family's legacy and the ways they had quietly shaped the neighborhood. He showed her photos of his father, explaining how he had invested in Woodcrest Pines when it was still a budding development, hoping to create a neighborhood built on inclusivity. Emma listened with admiration, feeling a deep connection to the history he shared. You've inspired all of us, Isaiah, she said, her voice full of sincerity. I want to make sure your father's vision lives on, that this community continues to honor his legacy. Isaiah nodded, his expression proud yet humble. You're doing that already, Emma. The work you've done with neighbor nights, the way you've brought people together, it's exactly what he would have wanted. They spent the afternoon talking about her future, and Emma shared her dreams of studying social work and helping communities across the country. Isaiah encouraged her, reminding her that the impact she had made in Woodcrest Pines was only the beginning of her journey. As Emma prepared for college, her family celebrated her achievements and the mark she had made on Woodcrest Pines. Her parents felt a mixture of pride and gratitude, knowing that their daughter had been instrumental in transforming not only their lives, but the lives of everyone in the neighborhood. At her graduation party, Isaiah and many of the neighbors gathered to honor Emma's accomplishments. People shared stories of how she had impacted their lives, thanking her for the kindness, empathy, and dedication she had shown. Jack and Linda stood by, listening to the stories with misty eyes, realizing that their daughter had embodied the very values they had once resisted. She had become a beacon of hope, a symbol of unity, and they were proud to call her their own. As Emma left for college, she promised to return to Woodcrest Pines, to continue the work she had begun. She wanted to keep Isaiah's legacy alive, to build on the foundations of inclusivity and respect he and his father had laid. Back in the neighborhood, Jack and Linda remained committed to their roles as community leaders. Jack expanded his pro bono work, supporting local families and small business owners, while Linda continued her volunteer work, helping new residents adjust and find their place in Woodcrest Pines. Isaiah's presence continued to be a steady influence, reminding everyone of the power of kindness and the strength of community. He often attended neighbor nights, sharing stories and offering support, his quiet leadership inspiring those around him. The Thompsons, along with Isaiah and Mrs. Caldwell, established an annual tradition called the Woodcrest Community Day. Held every spring, it was a celebration of unity, bringing together neighbors to participate in cultural performances, storytelling, and shared meals. The event grew each year, attracting families from neighboring communities who wanted to experience the warmth and inclusivity of Woodcrest Pines. The Thompsons felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that they had helped create something lasting and meaningful. During one Woodcrest Community Day, Jack took the stage to thank everyone for their participation. He spoke about the journey his family had taken, the lessons they had learned from Isaiah, and the importance of staying open to change. "We've all grown together," Jack said, his voice filled with emotion. "And it's thanks to people like Isaiah, who've shown us what it means to truly be a part of something greater than ourselves. Let's continue to honor this legacy and keep building a community where everyone feels welcome." The crowd applauded, and Isaiah nodded in acknowledgement, his heart filled with gratitude and pride. His father's vision had been realized, and the legacy of kindness and inclusivity would continue for generations to come. One evening, Isaiah sat on his porch, watching as the sun set over Woodcrest Pines. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that his father's dream had been realized. The neighborhood had transformed into a place where people of all backgrounds could come together, united by respect and compassion. Isaiah thought of Emma and her family, grateful for the role they had played in bringing the community closer. He knew that their journey had been challenging, filled with moments of doubt and growth, but they had come through it stronger, bound by the values they now held dear. As he watched the lights flicker on in each home, Isaiah felt a quiet pride, a sense of peace knowing that his father's legacy would live on. After her first year in college, Emma returned to Woodcrest Pines for the summer with new insights and a fresh perspective. She was excited to share her experiences with her family, and especially with Isaiah, who had inspired her to pursue a career in social work. Coming home felt different now. She noticed changes in herself and in the community that filled her with pride. One afternoon, she met with Isaiah at the community center. Emma described the projects she'd been working on at school, including a program that connected college students with under-resourced communities. Isaiah listened attentively, his eyes shining with pride. "You're carrying on the legacy, Emma. It's wonderful to see how far you've come." Emma smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I wouldn't be here without you, Isaiah. Everything I'm doing now is because you showed me what it means to truly care about people." Their conversation left Emma inspired and ready to make the most of her summer, working alongside her family to continue fostering the community they'd all helped build. Jack had also undergone a transformation over the past year, finding a renewed sense of purpose in his work. Inspired by Isaiah's influence and Emma's passion, he decided to focus his legal expertise on social justice issues, advocating for local families and small businesses who needed support. He started a series of free legal workshops at the community center, helping residents understand their rights and access resources. The sessions were well received, and Jack felt a profound satisfaction in using his skills to serve his community. One evening, as he wrapped up a workshop, a young father named Miguel approached him, expressing his gratitude for Jack's guidance. "Thank you for everything," Miguel said, his voice filled with appreciation. "People like me don't often have access to this kind of support. You're making a difference." Jack felt a surge of humility, knowing that his work was meaningful in a way he hadn't fully appreciated before. For the first time, he understood that true success wasn't about wealth or status. It was about the impact he could make on others' lives. Linda, too, had found her niche in Woodcrest Pines, organizing a community garden where neighbors could come together, grow fresh produce, and connect over shared interests. The garden quickly became a cherished part of the neighborhood, bringing people of all ages and backgrounds together in a shared space. The project was a success, with families gathering on weekends to tend to the plants and share recipes made with the garden's bounty. Linda loved the sense of camaraderie that had developed, and she felt grateful for the connections she had made with neighbors she once viewed as strangers. One afternoon, as she watered the rows of tomatoes, she was joined by Mrs. Nguyen, who shared a recipe for a traditional dish from her home country. They exchanged stories and laughter, and Linda realized that these relationships reflected the life she had once dreamed of, one built on acceptance, empathy, and a true sense of community. Isaiah remained a steady presence in Woodcrest Pines, quietly supporting his neighbors and guiding them with his wisdom. He was a source of encouragement for everyone, especially the Thompsons, who continued to look to him as a mentor and friend. One evening, he invited the Thompsons over for dinner, where they shared a meal and reflected on the journey they had taken together. As they talked, Isaiah shared stories about his father's early days in the neighborhood, how he had worked tirelessly to create a place where people could belong. People come and go, but the values we hold onto are what give a community its strength, Isaiah said, his voice filled with warmth. Your family has shown this neighborhood that we're stronger when we support each other. Jack, Linda, and Emma listened intently, feeling the depth of Isaiah's words. They knew that his influence had changed them in ways they hadn't anticipated, and they felt a renewed commitment to honoring his father's legacy. As summer approached, Linda and Emma organized the neighborhood's first annual culture fair, an event designed to celebrate the diversity within Woodcrest Pines. With help from Isaiah and other residents, they planned an afternoon filled with food, music, and performances representing the different cultures within the community. The event was a tremendous success, drawing residents from across the town and neighboring communities. Families shared dishes from their homelands, children performed traditional dances, and musicians played songs that celebrated heritage and unity. Emma watched as her neighbors mingled, sharing stories and laughter. She felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that the event reflected the values that Isaiah's father had envisioned, a place where people of all backgrounds could come together in friendship and respect. Isaiah, too, watched the event with quiet satisfaction, knowing that his father's legacy had not only been preserved but strengthened by the love and dedication of the community. As the culture fair drew to a close, Jack and Linda reflected on how far they had come. They knew that their journey hadn't been easy. They'd had to confront their own biases, open their hearts, and let go of long-held assumptions. But they felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that their growth had brought positive change to Woodcrest Pines. Jack addressed the crowd at the closing ceremony, expressing his gratitude for the neighbors who had helped his family grow and learn. This community has taught us that we're all stronger when we come together, he said, his voice filled with emotion. Thank you, Isaiah, and thank you to everyone here for showing us what it means to belong. The audience applauded, and Isaiah nodded in acknowledgement, his pride evident. It was a moment of unity, a celebration of the strength and resilience of the neighborhood. As summer came to an end, Emma prepared to return to college. She decided to leave a letter for Isaiah, expressing her gratitude and sharing the impact he had made on her life. In the letter, Emma wrote about how his kindness, wisdom, and example had inspired her to pursue a career in social work, to make a difference in people's lives just as he had in hers. You've taught me that community is more than just a place, she wrote. It's the people we support, the values we hold, and the connections we build. Thank you for everything. Isaiah read the letter with a sense of pride and humility, knowing that his father's legacy would live on through Emma's work. He felt grateful for the journey they had taken together and hopeful for the future she would help create. One quiet evening, Isaiah sat on his porch, reflecting on the transformation of Woodcrest Pines. He thought of his father, of the dreams he had carried and the community he had built, and he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The neighborhood had become a place of unity, a place where people respected and supported each other. Isaiah knew that the Thompsons had been a significant part of that transformation, and he felt grateful for their friendship and commitment to his father's vision. He knew that his work wasn't finished, but he felt a sense of peace, knowing that he was surrounded by people who shared his values. As the stars began to dot the sky, Isaiah closed his eyes, feeling a quiet satisfaction. His father's dream had come true, and he knew that Woodcrest Pines would continue to thrive as a beacon of kindness and inclusion. Before Emma returned to college, she and her family visited Isaiah one last time, sharing a meal and reminiscing about the journey they had taken together. As they talked, Jack and Linda expressed their commitment to carrying on Isaiah's legacy. We want you to know that your father's dream is alive in this community, Linda said, her voice filled with sincerity. We'll keep working to make Woodcrest Pines a place of acceptance and compassion. Isaiah nodded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and pride. Thank you. This neighborhood is what it is because of people like you. People who are willing to grow, to listen, and to support one another. Emma hugged him, feeling the depth of his words. She knew that no matter where her journey took her, she would always carry the lessons of Woodcrest Pines with her. The journey of the Thompsons and their neighbors in Woodcrest Pines serves as a powerful reminder of the impact each of us can make by opening our hearts to empathy, understanding, and unity. With the quiet influence of Isaiah and the lasting lessons of his father's vision, the Thompsons and the community have created a place where diversity is embraced and where everyone has a voice. Through acts of kindness, connection, and humility, they have built a legacy that will carry on for generations, reminding all who pass through that the true strength of a community lies in its willingness to lift each other up. As the Thompsons look to the future, they feel a renewed sense of purpose. They know that their journey isn't over, it has only just begun. If you enjoyed this story of growth, community, and compassion, please consider subscribing to our channel for more heartfelt and inspiring stories that remind us all of the power of unity. Subscribe for more stories of transformation and hope. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing more with you soon.